Welcome to Beyond the Dragon, where we explore indie tabletop role-playing games and their design, to inspire you to play them or take what you like for your own creations. Hi there, my name's Oscar C. Tango.
And my name is Sun.
We're both tabletop game designers and professional game masters who love TTRPG. Today we will be discussing gameplay loop design and how to integrate them. Welcome once again everyone to Unnamed Design segment.
Yay.
Today, as mentioned, we'll be discussing gameplay loops. After the OZR and NZR discussions of this set, it felt appropriate to do an episode on gameplay loops. So that's what we're doing this week. We're going to first define the two major types of gameplay loop we can identify, which is like what, like the motivation of the loop in the greater context of the game. And then we're going to be discussing like how to do gameplay loops and the reward and what those mean and how to hopefully bring certain aspects of the gameplay loop to broader game design so that games that are meant to be about certain things can have reward and gameplay loops that feed what the game is about rather than having a combat reward system for your supposedly social politicking game. So with that, let's get started. Just very briefly to define the two major types of gameplay loop that I can think of. We found some other descriptions, but they aren't quite along the same line I was thinking of. The main thing I would say that the two types of main loop are gameplay loops that serve a greater purpose and gameplay loops that serve themselves. What I mean by this is that a gameplay loop that serves a greater purpose is the gameplay loop is the game that you were playing. You go out and you do a thing, and then you come back and get a reward from doing the thing, and that is the loop. The greater purpose of that would be like, oh, we're going out on an adventure to find loot and gain levels and thwart the bad guys so that we can fight the big bad. As opposed to a self-contained gameplay loop, where we are going out and we are doing the thing because that's what this game is for, and that's why we're playing the game. For a quick example of the second kind, I would name Light, because Light off the bat is very much a game about having fun combat and adventures, where you're going out and you're fighting things and hoping to get loot so that you can use that loot to go out there and fight more things, and it's very self-contained. You are playing light to play light, and while you can have big bads and things like that, and there were even additions for that in a pre-built campaign and a like security level management system with strikes and all of that in some of the DLC for Light. Core book, Light is like, so you're gonna go out with some guns and some cool powers, you're gonna kick some ass with those guns and those cool powers, and you're gonna come back, you're gonna get more cool guns, your DM might have more cool powers for you. And then you're going to go back out and use those to kick some more ass, get some more cool guns, and use some more cool powers. It is entirely about playing the game light, and it's not necessarily distinctly designed to be like, say, an adventure game where it's like, oh, hey, we're going to go kill, the big bad, so we're going out to get, to hit this level to kill the big bad. Son, what have you got as an example for the service type of loop?
So, just for a nice easy frame of reference, we'll go with D&D, in which you have some kind of first, of course, you would form the party. This might happen before or after you have some kind of call to adventure. That might be you finding the adventure through rumors and the like, or the hook coming to you. This is then when you would equip your party to face this type of adventure, and then you would travel to the adventure. Often it is some kind of site or dungeon. Then you would explore the site and deal with the encounters within. Often this is fighting and the like, talking and dealing with the puzzles. Then you would return to the town and collect your experience / reward. Both this could be XP for gold, but we will get onto that. And then, depending on how much experience you get and the like, this might call for you to actually level up and gain your new types of things. And then you would, finish that off, use the money that you spent to, gain money-based rewards, and then start over again.
Indeed. And then you had some more thoughts on that because we were getting our notes
Oh,
ready. You had a very big segue. Please segue into that because you were getting some very interesting stuff.
yes, and so this sets up, the concept of how you'll basic D&D and all that stuff. You get experienced based on overcoming encounters, or more stated, overcoming monsters and fighting these monsters. Maybe not explicitly killing them, but overcoming and dealing with these enemy-based threats and the like. And while these situations can be utilized just for encounters in general, or you're dealing with an environmental or a social type of thing, that's what generally the guidelines provide you. And it makes it a little bit, it tells you straight away, hey, this game is providing you experience and your level up juice when you deal with monsters. And while, yes, you can utilize, oh, but monsters are just encounters, I can use that system for that. Sure, fair enough. People do it and all that. It's telling you straight away, this is the easy solution and this is what you do. And anything else beyond that is going to be um, the character-based side. Sure, I can go and do this type of adventure where it's all about intrigue and talking and the like. But if I'm not fighting anything, I'm not going to get the game, the number experience to make my character powerful. But as a player playing my character and role playing and experiencing the world, I'll gain that type of reward. The more narrative based type of reward of, meeting characters and, doing cool extra things and the like. And sure, I might get some things that the GM has prepared for me, items and connections, but that isn't inherently the number game side that will make my character better in my class. I'm pretty sure that's what you were wanting me to get at before we had an issue.
Yeah. Sorry, did you repeat that last part? I heard it, and but something about it like went over my head.
Um, Basically, the social or the part of the game that is not giving you the actual experience can give you, the narrative and the role play type of reward. But it's not going to inherently just make your character better in their class because you're leveling up or anything. That's not going to inherently do what it is.
Yes.
At
Okay.
least
Okay.
basic D&D. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for giving me that reframe because I was thinking something along the same lines, and I was hearing what you were saying, and I wasn't sure if that was what I was thinking of. All right. But yeah, and that makes a very good point because yeah, one of the things is a lot of people say, oh, the three pillars of D&D are exploration, combat, and roleplay. But like compared to combat, mechanically speaking, D&D doesn't care about the other two. Now, not to say that those two things cannot take up a major thing, and like there's advice in the DM's guide for XP rewards for dealing with traps or potential social situation. Like there are rules for giving XP for non-combat encounters. The XP rewards suggested pale in comparison to combat encounters. So much less. It's really, really different.
And I remember us having conversations about this, and I think it might have come up in the NCR, but even beforehand, where people talk about how it's like, yeah, no, there should be other rewards that you're getting that isn't just experience. It's like items and all that stuff. Getting relationship, bonds and all that. It's like, oh, you've got you're climbing the social ladder and all that. It's like that's cool. I love that stuff. But I also feel like for everyone to be on the same page with that, guidance, guides, guidelines, rules would be really nice for that. And then that's the chain that I would go along. It's like, yeah, give me guidance on that. Give me guidelines. And then if you want to get into the more nitty-gritty, yeah, no, give me like hard and fast rules about this. Otherwise, you are not really, in my eyes, stating that that's an equal part of your game or should be a mechanically focused part of your game. The players are not going to be rewarded in a substantial way that will, is part of the game, and it's just more about the narrative and is always going to be wishy-washy with players' perceptions on its importance and the GM trying to provide a fun experience for everyone at the table.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does, and I have a jumping off point.
Okay, go ahead.
So part of this discussion was, I believe during NZR, like we talked about something, and like reward loops, and Sun said explicitly, well, a lot of games aren't designed around that in like a reward loop concept. And I was like, oh shit, this is a hole we can go into, and I had to like call it there and change the subject. Which is why we're doing this video, but the disconnect between how the game is designed and its reward loop and what it proposes to be a reward loop is a big thing I want to focus on personally this episode.
Okay.
Which is why part of it is we're going to discuss building reward loops, because this is, a game design podcast with some review features. So, to get to that point, I actually want to focus in on what you said about bonds and items and things like that.
Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Specifically looking at the dragon itself and the design of the dragon, your class does not care about your social at all. Even face classes like the Bard and the Sorcerer, who have high charisma, do not care about your social, because from a mechanical class perspective, you get shit. You get nothing. You get spells that let you manipulate the minds of others, which a wizard could do. It is not a mechanical social reward. Similarly, there is not a mechanical exploratory reward unless you are getting items or gold. And even then, it is not the same as the XP juice that makes your character stronger, although sometimes items do boost a character in some way. And that is a fundamental disconnect to the concept of social being important to the game. Because if you don't have... You would have to homebrew social mechanics to make the social thing important and potentially tie them to a class. But you know what by default to some extent does have social implications? Your background. Backgrounds give certain mechanical features that say, oh, because of, your social circumstances, you can do these things, like forge documents. You are part of a religious organization, or some organization that will, shield you from harm. People respect you because they see that you've been through the bad shit. Stuff like that. That is a social aspect with no leveling to it. It is static. By comparison, I would like to bring up two things, one of which I'm very knowledgeable about, and one of which I kind of have like a half-blind knowledge, if you don't mind, son. If you have any questions, start now. This is our question break.
Go ahead. I want to see this train that you're going on.
Okay. So to start off, we have Cyberpunk. Red, specifically. I haven't looked at 2020. I also don't own 2020. I'm sorry, but I have only so much time, and I have to read a lot of games for this podcast now. Maybe one day. But anyways, for those who've never looked at Cyberpunk Red, or looked at the character improvement in Cyberpunk Red, it has a kind of an XP system in a weird way, and I'm not going to super get deep into that, but basically you get what are called improvement points, and you spend these points on upgrading your skills. And that's how you get better in Cyberpunk. Your stats are static.
So there is a group determinant for how much your improvement points you should be getting if the group does something on a mission, but there are also solo improvement point things for if players are out and about and doing their thing on their own. And it breaks down players into 4 archetypes. What type of player am I? Warrior, Socializer, Explorer, or Role Player. And it has a little description for each. Warriors are combat oriented. They like to fight things and build a big fighter and have big weapons and combat abilities. Socializers, players who want to, tell jokes at the table, kind of record those stories, contribute, in a way that might not directly be within game, and they like to take on supportive roles and talk to new characters. Explorers are players who want to find new things and see the world that you're in, and deal with the people that they see that are new, and love non-combat related puzzles and mysteries. And role players like to play their character accurately, have elaborate backgrounds and personal ties to a lot of characters, acting out important scenes like speeches and all that stuff. And then it has for players, it has 4 boxes, and it says pick the 5 most important things from any box. And just like if you see an important thing, circle it. Circle 5 things from all 4 boxes, or circle all 5 things between all 4 boxes. The one with the most circles is your primary playstyle. Your second most circles is probably your secondary playstyle. And then it has, on the improvement point table for earning, it has, besides the group, each of the types of things. So at like the bare minimum improvement points you might earn for a session, 10, the warrior is used combat skills often, even if not to be exceptionally effective. The socializer was a supportive and helpful part of the party in or out of game. The explorer says, attempted to investigate or explore the world, situation often, even if not to exceptional effect. And then the role player was attempted to role play a character often. And, they get more complex as you can reward more points up to like 80, where it's like, at 80, it's, the warrior did something really incredible in a combat encounter. The socializer did something really incredible to support the group, and it helped the group work together to accomplish their goals. The explorer, they use their investigation or exploration to uncover something really incredible in terms of the story of this game session. And the role player did something really incredible in roleplay, such as a heroic speech, a star moment, or amazing influence on the game's outcome through roleplay. And this says that players don't just improve... First off, you don't just improve your class, you improve all of your skills. And Cyberpunk has, since it's skill-based more than class-based, even the classes are just a unique skill or 2. It says you can improve your skills, you can improve your role skills for a lot of points. And so it's not just about what the group does, it's about what the players do.
Okay. I see. And how do you think that... No, but I want you to say it. But how do you think that feeds into the gameplay loop of Cyberpunk Red?
So I think it does 2 things. One, so Cyberpunk Red has a combat system. I wouldn't necessarily call it a combat game. A lot of the items and abilities in Cyberpunk Red are not about combat. The majority of your abilities in the game are not about combat. Combat breaks down into punching, hitting with a melee weapon, dodging, and shooting different types of guns. It's like 6 skills out of a set of, like, I think almost 50. Probably more. And so the game, first off, lets you improve things that are... that you find important. So maybe you didn't take a lot of points in a skill early, but you find yourself using it more. You can level that up with its open-ended leveling. And it also says you don't necessarily... if the group isn't necessarily doing a big mission, then in that case, you don't need to worry about getting a mission done this session, because leveling can come from just, role play and or just fighting something, just making progress, doing the thing that you would like to do in game is rewarded. Because I have players who are incredibly combat oriented. They tune out until they can shoot something, and that's okay. That's just how they play, and they still contribute to the game, and they're talking at the table, but they're really combat oriented. And I have a couple of players I have a player who right now, because he's doing a netrunner, he's definitely in the explorer category. He loves netrunning to steal the living shit out of money and find out people's dirty secrets. I have someone who's a role player who will do things just because that's a neat character tidbit. And stuff like that, like it says you don't have to do a specific thing to be able to make your character better in game. You can do what you want, and here's a metric for judging how much you did that. It's just for participating, just for being there at the table and playing the game your way. You get points. It opens the loop to it opens the loop to make Cyberpunk more broad. You do not have to end a run with combat. You can end it with stealth, negotiation, just like incredible outside the box thinking that causes things to happen and land in your favor. It encourages a multi-style approach to the same situations.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? Sorry, no, go.
No, I can definitely see that this was the one that you knew definitely a lot about.
Yeah, this is the one I know a lot about. If I had to put words to it, it doesn't require players to do a certain thing to level up. It lets players level up by just playing the game. That is the main focus.
In of itself, when you are playing Cyberpunk, you have the missions and the like, but the missions themselves, while they have a goal for them, each of those player styles infer how potentially that player is going to deal with the goal itself. So yeah, while you I can understand Cyberpunk to be dealing with these types of missions, then that extra player character role, spices up each of those ways of doing it. I've never played Cyberpunk Red, so I appreciate this breakdown of that.
And I will say, on another end, Cyberpunk games in general, but Cyberpunk Red and also Shadowrun specifically, I will say, in terms of gameplay loop, have a problem with external justification. So one of the things I also wanted to... So, okay. Remember when I said a gameplay loop can be in service of, like, a broader goal?
Yes.
This is a very good reward loop. Cyberpunk, having not read Tales from the Red, is very much kind of about self-contained runs and a somewhat episodic style of play. You can do more open campaigns with it. I'm running a bit of a hex crawl myself right now. But broadly speaking, Cyberpunk, it wants you to be very street level, so it struggles a bit with end goals. It doesn't want your players getting involved in high politics, which is fair and fine. But so, it winds up being that, like, you get rewarded just for playing the game, but what is this gameplay loop in service of? Getting better at playing Cyberpunk.
I see.
And Shadowrun's even worse. Shadowrun is infamous for paying players enough money at the end of a single run that they could retire for life, but they don't do it because the characters are addicted to Shadowrunning. And, like, that's like an ongoing joke in the series, but, like, what's the external reason to play more Shadowrun with these characters who could retire? We like playing Shadowrun with these characters. And that's a fine thing, but from a narrative perspective, it can at times feel a little bit lacking. I personally struggle with games that don't give me a narrative reason to be invested in the loop.
Okay. So what game does provide that for you?
What a fantastic question. I'll tell you when I find out.
Okay.
No. Part of it is just like I don't play a lot of games anymore because I mostly spend my time running them. There are games like Forged in the Dark. There are games that give you like an endpoint And to some extent, I see those as a bit of a like, you know, a D&D adventure comes to the end, you beat the big bad. Your gameplay loop has been in service of that, and that was the game. You could do Cyberpunk where, like, you have to, like, stop a conspiracy from fucking over your local area, and that could be the end of that story and that loop, and that's fair. And that is a valid thing while keeping it street level. From what I know of it, Band of Blades would qualify because it has an obvious, like, success-fail state. Shadow of the Demon Lord, to an extent, when you start if you don't go on to Paragon levels and you start talking about, like, 10th level adventures, this is, like, world-ending shit, and it's, do you save something, or does everything go to hell? Okay. Or I guess, you know, the void.
So I guess in that sense, because you're bringing up a lot here, there is the gameplay loop, but you also care about the end of this loop.
Yes.
Like the end of the entire game that all these loops are getting to.
Yes, and I wanna touch on this a little bit later, because this is going in the. I'm glad that you're bringing this up. This is going in the direction I want, but I want to discuss one of the other more open-ended, like, reward loop things. I'm specifically focusing on reward loops right now. I should mention. Okay. The other one is, I think, all of Chronicles of Darkness, but I only have experience with Vampire the Requiem, and only from a player side. I haven't read the GMing section because I really kind of want to sit in ignorance and, like, you know, I kind of have a grasp of the game mechanics. And I don't want to, like, know how to GM it because I don't want to, like, accidentally metagame or anything. I try not to do that, and I don't want to do it on accident, so I just tend to prefer ignorance. I didn't read Mouse Ritter until this podcast because Sun tried to run a couple Mouse Ritter games and I didn't want to know anything about them.
Yeah.
But anyways, so in definitely Vampire, I think all of Chronicles, there is a thing called beats. Certain things that players do generate beats, and I think you need to generate as many beats as you have players to generate an XP, which you then use to buy skills, things called merits, which are like bonuses, and that is, and then sometimes other special things like blood potency for vampires and disciplines for vampires, and that's kind of just how, like, the improvement system works. The reward loop is you do things, they generate beats generate XP, you get better, and hopefully fuck up less. At least in Vampire, that's how it's going for us. Hopefully fuck up less is not going well. I love it. But so anyways, the ways that you generate beats, I don't know all the ways. Apparently combat can generate beats on its own, because the one time I got into a fight, we got XP, and I got like 5 beats for the team of 6. But the other thing is, there's these things called aspirations. There are long and short aspirations. Short aspirations should take about a scene or two to complete. Like it should be resolved in a scene. You might have to start it a scene earlier. And long-term aspirations might take multiple sessions or multiple scenes to complete. And generate these beats. So, for instance, a common beat in my vampire group is feed successfully. You would be surprised how little we earn beats from that aspiration. But in general, it kind of says player set a goal that could be completed in the short term and can be completed in the long term, and that will be added up towards gaining a point of XP that you can then use to improve your character. And it's very open-ended, but instead of having the GM look at like how many rewards should you get for this, I assume gives the GM a set of things that like are good to give beats for. And then says also player goals. Did they complete or work towards any of their major goals this session? Yes, give them a beat.
Okay.
Again, I know a lot less about this one. I hope I'm getting it right. If not, then I think that it could be better implemented the way I'm suggesting, but I hesitate to criticize something I don't know the full picture of.
Yeah.
From where I sit, it seems pretty great. So those are my reward loops.
Okay.
My good reward loops.
For me, when I was thinking about the concepts that we were talking today, gameplay loops and the rewards and all that stuff, I was thinking it's like, okay, When I think XP for gold, I immediately know what the core of this game is: treasure hunting. Just getting treasure, getting gold, and probably from dangerous situations. Because otherwise, why are we playing this if it's we're just getting free XP, and then somehow converting that. And because of my experience of reading lots of LSR games, that is either bringing them back to a safe haven, and or wasting the money that you have collected from it on trivial things by boozing it up or donating it to charity or the like.
Yes, gain XP by partying. I love crowns.
Yes, exactly. But that infers, it encourages a game action. First, go to dangerous location, get the goods, and then come back, and then, as you said in the case of crowns, party the shit up. So that infers, what your characters are in the fact that they're going to go do those things and then just basically waste their money. And in one aspect, it's like, okay, I need to make a character that will want to do that, to just waste their money to be able to convert this into XP. And so that's a very gamey aspect of it, a conceit that you're going to have to make. But I also think that is part of the game that I do appreciate. These, I don't want to say restrictions, but
Qualifications.
yeah. And those are what make the games different and interesting, in my opinion.
No, and I agree. And I mean, a game asking you to meet it at its level is not that unreasonable. It's already asking you to roleplay a fantasy character to some extent in a world of some description. So, asking for it to then say that your character should be one that would engage in the lifestyle the game is trying to present makes sense.
Yeah. And if you're like, nah, that doesn't sound right, it's like, okay, sure, if you want, tweak some things, or this game's not for you. Because if it has a lot of cohesiveness about that entire system, then it might be not worth your trouble on tweaking some things. But yeah, I love looking at how am I advancing in this game, to use a little bit more of a general term than just XP.
Yes.
And if it's stating, it's like for surviving, as we were introduced to the concept for in OZR and NZR, it's like, as long as you are surviving, you get XP. Yeah.
Yeah, just making it out of
And
a
that tells
session
you,
with a living character is important.
yeah. And that I like the concept of saying it like that, instead of, oh, anytime you play a session, gain some experience, which is a totally fine way to do things. But also, it is, which I think this also came up in our conversation that sparked this concept. I also am a little saddened by just that concept of, oh, just get XP for just playing the game, because that's totally fair way, but also it is a design space that you've decided to ignore. It's like, oh, but don't you want to state what your game is about by rewarding that? If your players do that action, you reward
Yes.
them.
Yes, I do. I do remember this conversation, and specifically, I think I was complaining about how OZR, with it only being about surviving, you know exactly how many sessions until you level. It can be hard to tell with NZR and lead to a party XP disparity.
Yes, and and then I was talking about, it's like, yes, and that's where the D&D milestones thing is, where, oh yeah, just do milestones, forget about tracking XP. But then the dungeon masters, game masters just randomly just say, okay, yeah, milestones reached, woo, because we did something random or stuff like that. And in a D&D sense, players want their characters to level up and get the next cool thing. And if they have no idea when that is occurring, that will, be annoying / sad. So having clear ways of understanding how the advancement works, I think, is definitely extremely beneficial to all of this that we're talking about.
Yes, it does, and it does come into the reward loop where, character improvement is a reward, and what constitutes character improvement can be mechanical, role play, or just new exciting things to do.
Mm.
So with that in mind, or what you're saying makes a lot of sense. What is your game about? Reward players for doing it so that they can earn these improvements.
Yeah. And I might not directly connect to this, but I wanted to bring up something. Based on some discussion with Oscar out of this, I have been designing a game based on the Elder Scrolls. I'll just say that. And I was very much inspired by a particular blog, Dreaming Dragon Slayer, and their talk on advancements and diegetic advancements, and how it was inspired by Mouse Ritter and Into the Odd, and their concept of XP for gold and like.
It's interesting that you say Into the Odd when Into the Odd has some of the most aggressive milestone XP I've ever seen.
Oh yes, but I'm just clumping those two things together. But it talks about Mouse Ritter and Into the Odd as they're two separate things. One's more milestoney, and Mouse Ritter is more just XP for gold.
Oh, okay. Good.
But Into the Odd's milestones are directly tied to the concept of Into the Odd. On you go into an expedition, you have survived a number of expeditions, and then eventually you have survived a number of expeditions. No, at that point, your apprentice that you take on has now survived a number of expeditions. So it directly infers what you have to do to level up, and then also states, at a certain point, you are now a master training someone new. But what I wanted to bring up was the blog post Diegetic Advancement Triggers by Dreaming Dragon Slayer, which definitely lit up my brain juices, and how it definitely, I think, infers the concept of, XP for doing a thing. Therefore, this game is about that. Therefore, I should probably do this thing to get the thing. Advancements is how they infer the concept of leveling up or improving in some way. In this concept, it's probably gaining potentially a little bit more HP, potentially improving your stats, but it's not always guaranteed. You're rolling the die to basically see if it's above your numbers, and then you can increase it. So that's the little caveat there. You're not always going to increase it, but if you continue to do the same action, you'll eventually definitely increase it. But it gives like a list, D6 66 table of examples of these advancement triggers, and their conversion of the XP for gold from Mouse Ritter is when you emerge from an adventure site with treasure, advance. When you share a meal with new friends, advance. And they gave inspiration of what this could be. It's like Ghibli movies. When you restore lasting peace to an area, advance. Avatar: The Last Airbender.
How could the peace be lasting if it had to be restored? Sorry. That like you said, restore lasting peace, and that thought just occurred to me. Like, how could it be lasting if it needed to be restored in the first place?
Yeah. when you carry out a mission for your guild, advance, mouse guard. And I really like this tweak or different way of going about XP for doing an action type of thing. This straight up tells you what you'll improve by doing. And because it's not a guaranteed every time you do this, you're not going to max out your stats or the progression of whatever the game is. And I'm losing my train of thought here. Do you have anything to build upon this as I collect myself?
Yeah, so what it sounds like is this is very much about creating story advancement triggers based on the style of game that you're doing and entirely dependent upon the narrative you're going for. When you break bread with new friends, it sounds like something from Wander Home, a game very much about exploring a post-war world.
Thank you for saying story-based advancement triggers, because this allows you to, going back to the D&D, you fight monsters to get XP, but what about all that social and intrigue stuff type of thing? Yeah, this is where it's like, yeah, why not have a list of a couple things that are in the more fighty thing, in the social, in the intrigue thing, and it's all story. It's within the game. The characters are just doing stuff, and then in a power by the apocalypse sense, when within the fiction of the game, when you've done something that will trigger a move, in this case, it's you advancing. And I really like that way of doing things. I think that it definitely could inspire people with their gameplay loops and rewards.
Agreed. I actually, so we've talked about designing good reward loops because those are a fundamental close to the gameplay loop, because the gameplay loop itself is very situational. It's you go out and you do the thing, and then when you complete it, you get a reward. So that end point and that beginning point are very important because it is the inciting incident and the ultimate reason why you've done it. I kind of want to move a bit into discussing creating more effective gameplay loops for the style of game that you're creating, and I want to start by discussing a gameplay loop that I think is incredibly flawed, and unfortunately it requires us to continue talking a bit about 5th edition. I don't want to just sit here and bash something, because that's not what this episode is about, but I think it provides but 5e is a cultural touchstone, and I think it provides the best bad example of what I'm looking for. We've said multiple times now that the reward loop for D&D is you murder something, and class advancement is all about being able to more effectively murder. No matter how grand the story that you are telling, when you look at what becoming better in D&D gives you outside of outright stat improvements or proficiency improvements, and even then those feed into the killing, the game is mechanically about killing something. It provides you the most support with supposedly balanced encounters, XP rewards for balancing those encounters, and providing you a very large list of interesting things to fight. People say you can use D&D to run anything, and you can tell some really amazing stories using that. The D20 modern engine is not a bad engine inherently. It's really not. But the way that the rest of the game's focus and design is all about combat. So if I go out and I, negotiate with a king and, talk and avert a war, narratively that might have the benefit of war not happening, and I might get all sorts of good feels out of that. But the mechanical reward loop, which is what we're discussing, the GM could give me more XP, and I level up, and I get more things for killing. And, people will say, oh, well, you have all these spells for social situations, or all these spells for trickery, or other utility, and it's like, yeah. But you know what?
mind controlling somebody is not a, more rewarding thing for a character who cares about people's autonomy. Tricking and deceiving is not something that helps an honest paladin. Paladins are charisma characters. And their spells almost exclusively involve combat. Hell, you're not even really supposed to cast spells as a paladin because you have the ability to just fucking sacrifice them to better murder people. It winds up being a thing where what you are given can be used creatively to solve problems, but the improvement is it is the majority of the improvement you get helps you fight.
Yes.
So, no matter how social or explory a game of D&D you're running, the game is about the fight. Overwhelmingly. And so that is a reward loop that doesn't reward or improve upon the social or exploratory aspects of the game. That is the main criticism I'm trying to make here. And so so looking at that, we need to ask ourselves, what are things that are reward loops that would allow you to do something else? And the main things I think we could look at would be social or exploratory, because those are the other two major pillars, and those are fair. There are also purely roleplay things, purely narrative things, and I would like to an extent, look at Powered by the Apocalypse a bit, because it is very explicitly a play to find out style, where you are there to experience a somewhat simulated story in a world until you think the story has hit a natural ending point, and that is a very different style that doesn't necessarily look at a loop, which is interesting and worth talking about in this gameplay loop discussion.
Okay.
Do you have thoughts off of what I just said so far?
As you were just saying that stuff, I was just starting to think about it. It's like it would be cool if obviously there would need to be more structure with probably downtime to provide the social upgrades or social advancements, where it's like you've gained a new bond, you've gained a new rival type of thing, because I'm 100% open to the concept of just straight up saying it's like, okay, you've got this thing now, but it would definitely work better with those straight up, you've been given this thing, in more episodic play. Because a nice tight gameplay loop works really well for episodic play, where the loop isn't fuzzy and can become an overall multiple different loops or unfinished loops. I would love bonds and rivals and all that to be almost structured in a way where it's just like at the item list that you can get in D&D, or like a bestiary.
Yeah, and that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I like to joke about your inventory thing, but in some way, like, mechanizing or commodifying these benefits at least lets you sit down and say, this is what you get. Like a cool sword does something because it's a cool because that's what makes it cool, the thing it does. Similarly, gaining, a friend in a particular area should get you something like, for instance, like access to that thing. And there is a game that does do this to an extent. And it is Powered by the Apocalypse game, so boy howdy, we're about to go into some shit. To cut it very shortly, and not go into Powered by the Apocalypse overall, but just this one game. It is called Legacy: Life Among the Ruins. I'm specifically referring to 2nd edition. There is a concept called treaties. Whenever you give a gift or trade, or there is some kind of a social interaction and certain events occur, one group will give another group, and in this point it's families, because families are the overarching like factions, and then you also play a player who is part of your own faction. But so families will give each other treaties. And you can call in a treaty basically as leverage in a trade, as a debt to be paid, something like that. So you can be like, oh, I'm going to use this treaty to get access to your generator so that I can learn how to build one for myself. Or, okay, I'm going to use this treaty so that you will give me this resource I need, but then the treaty is spent. And that is very much a mechanical, like, this is a thing that you're getting for trade purposes in between groups. It is a favor and a debt to be called. And really big favors and debts might need multiple treaties to be called in.
So,
And, yes.
This is probably going to be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just looking at a dot point that I have that was basically just listing out vague concepts of what rewards are. Gaining power, getting better at something, acquiring new abilities or items, forming new bonds, climbing social ladders, earning access to new locations, or having new experiences. And I was just reading that over and over, and for me, then I'm just thinking this feels like a lot of like me, like just like power hungry, just consuming. And colonialism just popped in my head there, but I would love to think of rewards that aren't along that same train of thought, where rewards aren't just about the individual, but about the group or the wider world. I know it's a kind of a tangent, but it's definitely something to think about, depending on the game that you are playing or trying to design. I've just definitely thought it's like, rewards are definitely very individualistic.
No,
in this collaborative game that we play.
That can be true. But I mean, sometimes, a character does need to get things for themselves. And there are, like, in terms of group benefits, it requires the group to agree on what they want for a benefit, which sometimes happens. Improved
totally.
safety
This is where
of, like, the group.
Yeah, no, totally. But this is where you do the plus, the 1 and 1. You get one individual point, and then there's a group point.
Very true.
Get the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry for the tangent. I was just thinking of that and saying, oh yeah, just want to throw that out there.
No, you're right. Like, a chunk of those were individualistic, but sometimes individualistic rewards exist to serve the group.
No, they can. But then also it can lead to another dot point I have, where you are only thinking about yourself. And, this definitely happens with D&D and D&D based games, where people make 1,000 characters, and almost 100% of the time they'll be making those 1,000 characters with no connection to a game, in a very isolated manner from any other potential member that might be a part of that party. And they can do that because they can interact with the rules in a very isolated manner. I know what I can do with this character, and this made me think of like they can't think of what this character can potentially do by just playing the game. You get this stuff. No, they are interacting with the game rules, and they know exactly what their character is getting, because if they're making like a character future levels above, the game has already provided that structure. But the rest of the stuff, items and the like, that is left up to the player and the GM and the group to make. And you all have to work together to make sure you will get that stuff, items and the social, I'd love to, have a connection to a prince or, a noble and all that. So, that is a group effort. And a lot of time players are building characters not thinking about that group effort. And a lot of time, fair point, players don't get that great tabletop experience, and having a group and a game master that will provide that space and experience to get those things. And so they retreat back to the rules, retreat back to the actual guidelines that they're given. And that's why people want, to kill monsters to get experience, because they know what they're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, that touches on it. Like, if you don't have rules for the rewards outside of, what are your rules rewarding? And that's what players are going to default to. Although I will say I had another thought about this a little bit. I think part of it is that D&D went from a play to find out game where your character dying didn't really matter to a game where your character could survive, so it's struggling to go from play to find out to proper story game.
I see.
And I will elaborate on that in a bit, but do you have anything else to say?
Not exactly. We've gone through any dot points that I did have, and right now I can't pull anything out of my ass that I can really think about.
All right, then I'm going to begin bringing this to a close by touching on a few more things, and then we will discuss like tips for designing more rewarding gameplay loops for what your game is.
Okay.
So, one of the things about play to find out versus play for an external narrative and how the gameplay loop works with that, I think the self-contained loop works better with a play to find out game, because fundamentally you're playing the game because it's fun, and then having the exciting things happen is playing to find out. So, back in the old school days and in OSR, it broadly is like, oh, we're gonna have this crazy adventure and fight these crazy things and meet these people in this interesting location and this dangerous dungeon, and if we die, we'll bring in a new character, because we aren't here to have a character go through a story. We're here to go through a story, and characters are the vehicle through which we do that. So we're playing to find out what happens, what's going on in this, fantastical situation. And that works, because if you're having fun doing the thing and you're getting like a short episode or narrative of what's going on, that's pretty great. But it's very different with the narrative focus of defeat the big bad. And, the big bad could be the targeted big bad of just a very specific adventure. That's probably how the concept of the big bad got started out, was higher level adventures had a big bad guy, and then you had settings with big bad supervillains in them. But now it's the save the world plot is one of the most common tropes and plots in the genre, and there's some big villain behind it, not necessarily a natural disaster to avert, but some malevolent force you can defeat more often than not. And that's just kind of, to me, I can see the line of play to find out to like building a more interesting narrative with more survivable characters who invest in that narrative. And I can see why specifically D&D, which is just cannot change from its roots without massive backlash, would struggle with this transition.
Okay. So I can see what you're getting at.
Yeah, so that's where like D&D, the difference between a like gameplay loop for a goal and a gameplay loop for the gameplay loop's sake can differ from table to table and game to game, because what you and your table and your GM are doing are, different. Episodic games very frequently have a for the gameplay loop where the episode is the loop. You go through an episode of the thing, an adventure. And then, if you want to do a big narrative one, then you string your episodes together into a season, let's say, where like they all tie into a major event that your players are, working around it, and they can see the bigger picture for being invested in it for longer. So with that, and kind of taking on, but then you get like very narrative style play to find out games where let's take some character where the Apocalypse World engine, the thing that spawned, powered by the Apocalypse, very classically or very very much said, here are some archetypes for characters. Here is a situation where shit is going to get bad and there will be drama and struggles for them to live through. How do they live through it? How do they cope with their individual strengths, weaknesses, knowing each other, and sometimes being friends and sometimes being enemies? And you can do that, and that game said, okay, well, we're going to play to find out, but we're going to just play to find out about, like, the lives and times of these characters. It is slice of life play to find out gameplay loop, where the reward loop is for doing things that your character would do, and I'd have to look at Apocalypse World Engine 2E to remember exactly how XP works. The only thing I remember about XP for sure is that you gain XP for doing certain things with your character and completing like specific moves or something like that. But I know you also get XP for maxing out your HX, and one of the easiest ways to max out HX is a sex scene. Unless you're sleeping with a battle babe, in which case you don't get XP because fuck you, battle babes will steal your XP. But so it very much takes the self-contained loop, playing the game to play the game and have this story, and puts it in a narrative frame where it says, here's the ability to create a narrative situation, drop in some roleplay characters, and just see what happens. It's slice of life in, like crazy times. And that's really interesting.
No, that is.
And it has built an effective and popular gameplay loop, so popular that Powered by the Apocalypse is one of the more well-known narrative engines.
And that in and of itself, with how, the playbooks work, the playbooks, each playbook, in a D&D sense, is a class, and they themselves have their own things that they need to do to gain experience. Well, you already touched on that. And, you could consider those milestones.
And
they're straight up told to the player, do these things, that's a milestone.
Yeah, and it winds up being a bit more like NZR's milestones for a point of XP.
Yeah.
But one of the things that does is it also, because each character is a different archetype, it winds up like you aren't just playing a class, you're playing a character. And I say that because while, you don't have to take on a set personality and name, you are a character who is engaging with the game at a different level. Apocalypse World Engine says, fuck it. You want to be someone who controls a gang? There's the Chopper. You want to control a city? There's the Hard Hold. You want to be the dude who fights? Well, the Chopper does fight and social. If you don't want to do social at all, Gunlugger. Oh, do you want to be a doctor, a support role? Take on the Angel. Do you want to be a support role in the sense that you like make things and work on things? Play the mech head. Do you want to be a weird psychic? Play the Brainer. It gives you a character who exists in the world in a unique way. And that's kind of important to the fact that it is dropping archetypes and characters into a world. What is our misfit cast for today's this adventure, for this story?
Yeah.
But also, oh no, go.
Oh no! You continue your thought.
But also, one of the other things is that the fact that these characters engage with the world and game in a different way and gain XP for different things is it does do the thing of making individual or making different like styles of reward with each playbook getting XP from different things. And that's really good and helpful and important.
And this goes back to your Cyberpunk Red situation as well with the player roles.
And I will say one thing it does kind of struggle on would be group rewards, except for maybe in the concept that rewarding your Angel and rewarding your Hard Hold helps the entire group. Because the Hard Hold has a city that they control that will become a main focal point, although it doesn't have to be the only city or the only focal point. And the Angel heals people. Why would you not help that person constantly? You're gonna get shot. But anyways,
So
oh no, go please.
yeah, so with that, like, I feel like we should consolidate our thoughts or like tips or what we think we would want to think about when thinking about like helping gameplay loops be stronger, or the rewards from it, or the actions of a game and what you get from that. Do you
Well,
have any
yes. Well, so I was
summary
actually.
points?
I'm glad that you got there because I was going to kind of now that we've been going for over an hour. Whoops. I'm going to go in and I wanted to talk about like designing better gameplay loops that reward more aspects to the game. So clearly, despite some of my obvious and poorly veiled opinions at the start, I've come around to thinking that play to find out is in and of itself valid. So a self-contained gameplay loop is just as good as an externally designed one. The question is, what do you want your game to be about, and how do you reward doing that thing? It is okay to make a focused game. And if you want to add in potential ways to expand out from that concept of focus, you can just, what you need to do is you need to look at ways at rewarding additional methods of engaging with the game. That is the heart of, I think, what we're both saying. If you would agree, son, I don't want to speak for you.
No, yeah, I can agree with you on that. Yeah.
So, what would be what are the ways to engage with the game? Well, I think actually, I think warrior, socializer, explorer, and role player break it down pretty well. Do you think that there is something that is missing there, or a misstep at all?
No, those are the good broad categories that I can immediately think of.
So yeah,
I know.
yeah,
I'll just bring up that there are a couple of other games out there that call to player types. I
Mhm.
know one out there is D&D 4th edition. It might be in the player's handbook, but it might be in the game master's guide. They provide a very, very nice breakdown on all of that stuff, but specifically the player roles, and that could be a nice thing to look at too. But yeah.
yeah, and so basically, combat is the most common immediate reward. Combat or to some extent exploration would I think be the two most major and immediate rewards. Because combat XP from killing monsters is very common in a lot of modern games, or exploration XP from bringing treasure out of a dungeon is a common reward in a lot of games. Gold for XP is very popular from what I've seen. And with those two things, like those have very obvious things, but for warriors, I mean, other than fighting things, it can be tough to add in more broad gameplay loops because they kind of just want to fight. And basically, you can just help them fight more, like giving them war bands or making them, have a reputation for being intimidating to attract like strong foes for like nemesis and duels, if that's what they're interested in.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that where basically they get a notoriety and they attract more challenges, or they gain access to demanding challenges from individuals that may not uh, be easy to access.
Yeah. Ooh, and you know what? Another thing I'm going to suggest here that might be a little bit crazy. Not crazy, but might be a little bit interesting. So, we've talked a lot about XP and milestones, and I think fundamentally that to an extent, some people are just never going to trust milestone XP. The horror stories are too numerous, and it can be too easily abused if it's purely milestone, except with like stated milestones, arguably like into the odd. But I think one of the things is I think NZR actually hit the nail on the head if you combine NZR's style of XP with beats as a concept from Chronicles, where what it is that you earn not necessarily the beats for XP system, But like the amount of XP necessary to get a level is, based on some party value, so that way the group advances together. I'm a big fan of that concept, and I don't like solo advancement. I tend to find that makes parties a little bit unbalanced, even though I know it's common in OSR. So the style and idea quickly becomes, you get your number of players, and when you earn, as much XP like as say times the party level, you level up. So, you have 5 players at level 1, 5 XP levels you, and then you take these narrative beats, these narrative goals, like what were existing in NZR, where you do a thing, and that makes it much easier to align it with your style of game, and it's gain an XP. And so that way, players participating and having, character goals, as well as, party goals, let's say, let the party improve as a collective, and when the party improves, everyone gets, like you were saying, an individual level up, and then because the group went up, they should get a group reward that benefits them all in some capacity. I think that's a really good idea for a gameplay loop, because it also encourages your players to, in some capacity, work together.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, how do you create good reward loops for socializers and role players?
So immediately it's getting socialization can be done in what you've got, making friends, making enemies,
Hell yeah.
patching over issues, so diplomacy.
Just getting new connections in general, meeting new people is, I think, a really important part of
Meeting new
socializing.
connections. Opening up people, so making bonds. So when you break down what socialization is, there's different avenues you can attack it, and I mean that not in the fighty way. With that, ooh.
So then so that's, well, so I will say I would say that according to Cyberpunk is more about role players, characters who are invested in the role play style narrative. I mean, you're not wrong, and see, that's the thing, is socializer and role player is kind of misleading in the concept of Red specifically, and I am unfortunately using the terms in those concepts. Socializers is like socializing at the table.
I see. With that, I know there are games out there where, at the end of the game, vote on, who uplifted the table the most. This thing, give them a point, and all that. This is a very out of game thing, but in terms of the Cyberpunk Reds concept of the socializer, I think that would fit that. Fit this in basically rewarding the socializer for socializing with the players themselves.
Yeah, okay, so like keep up the party spirits and, like participate in the group.
Yeah, and participate in the group. Who was, the most encouraging, and even the act of having a party rewarding each other concept at the end of the game can help influence people on doing those actions. And I guess in this case, it would be, the socializer would think more about those concepts and those actions. That's where I'm going with it, at least.
Yeah, and one of the hard things about Socializer is it is explicitly looking at a player who's at the table to socialize with the people at the table. So making a reward loop for a player who does that is more complicated because it's very external from the game itself.
But then also, a reward loop. You gain a reward, but then can you spend that reward to continue to encourage them to continue this loop.
You know what? Actually, then looking at that, I actually do have some suggestions of just hearing what you're saying and also staring at my open copy of Cyberpunk Red. So some of the things for like what type of player am I for Socializer is like reminisce about favorite game moment, contribute to the success of the group, team up to beat a challenge, and be a part of the group. I feel like getting the Socializer to focus on improvements for the group over necessarily like purely personal improvements might be a good way. Like do something for the benefit of the group. Or a Socializer type player, in terms of what Red calls them, might be a very good reward, like, milestone for the loop, where, like, they improve the party and do things for the party, because they're very much there for the social aspect. What are your thoughts?
I can definitely agree with that. And, it's not directly related, but with the reward loop, spinning the reward to continue the loop type of thing, the concept that I can just think of is the bonds flaws thing with D&D, where if you can call upon these things in the game and to help it influence your action by default, how the rules kind of go with it is you would be then given inspiration. In which case, a lot of the time you'd probably want to utilize that inspiration as soon as possible, or give it to another player, type of thing.
Yeah,
which infers kind of the role play, social aspect of it.
very much. Yeah, you're right. You're very much true. So, do you have any more real thoughts? Because we've talked a lot about gameplay loops now, and like we've gone from what they are, what some major features are, reward loops, and like self-fulfilling loops and the benefits of those over narratively focused loops. Any major thoughts, or do you think that we have? Do you think that we've done enough on designing loops and discussing the way these loops work to reach a conclusion?
Yeah, no, like the more I talk about this, the more it's just going to get more muddy and muddier because I have not prepared this amount of thoughts, and I'm just going to start pulling stuff out of my ass. I just want people to think about what game action they want to encourage in the game, and then give a reward for it. And if the reward then also encourages that game action or another game action that you want to infer, even more better for it.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like I've without a game design document in front of me when like writing if things written on a loop, I don't have anything to really add about like specific loop design. But I think I've said most of what I want to say. Just if your game isn't about combat, stop making the main reward loop be focused on combat, or just add equal avenues outside of combat, because like I'm so done with combat. I run so many combat games, and I got to play in a truly social game, and I don't want to go back.
Well, that is not really related to...
No, it's a reward loop. If I'm not rewarded for playing on the more social aspect of the game, then I have little to no reason to engage with it.
Fair enough.
That's the fundamental thing about this, is give reward loop options for players who want to do more than hit shit with a stick.
Oh yeah, totally. But just from my outside knowledge, there is much more connected to that than what you've just said.
No, that's entirely true. But with that, I mean, I suppose if we've said all that either of us is going to say, if we're both out of ideas...
Oh, totally.
Then in that case, thank you for joining us today as we discussed gameplay loop design and gameplay reward design in an unnamed game design segment. Join us next time for more indie tabletop discussion and design. I've been Oscar C. Tango, and joining me has been Sun Gone.
You can find me at sungone_ on Twitter, Sun on Start Playing Games, and Sungone on itch.io.
And you can find me at StrandedTTRPG on Twitter, Oscar C. Tango on startplaying.games, and Stranded Publishing on itch.io. You can find all those links in the description. And remember, don't be afraid to adventure beyond the dragon.